You're going to just sit there, or you're going to say something to people? Steve.
I can't say anything. The light's still red. Are we going?
Right. That means it's
Well, no,
when you go to green, that means no.
But see, this is radio. With radio, you don't have to worry about all these red and green and all this stuff.
We should talk about radio more often.
Well, and that's actually how all this happened. It came to the fact that we always talk about radio, and then talk radio became so popular, and then we said, well, why don't we talk about radio? Because it only makes, and where it's all going and where it's been. So you and I sat down, smoked a couple of No, I can't say that on podcasting.
No,
that's podcasting.
Yes.
He's Dave's a cop. You can't talk about that.
Oh my God! All right. Yeah. So basically, that's where the idea.
I know, in my closet over here.
There's a voice I hear, and I don't know if it's God or what.
Well, he may not know that we're actually recording.
We're actually recording now.
We're doing the show.
And
oh, there he is. Okay.
Yeah, so
should I introduce who our guest is?
Yeah. Who is our guest?
This is Pete Salant or Salant. Well, you do. Salant. Anyways, this is Pete, and Pete's been with us for a long time now. On the we do a radio program also. This is called Radio Friends Again, and we thought we would bring some of our friends into the world of podcast as far as the visual side goes. So Pete has been he's a very good technician. He's a very good friend. He's done all kinds of stuff. So we thought he can be our first victim because he's all forgiving and loving, and he's that's what it's about. So we do this whole show without recording it. Pete will say, "Okay, that's good. Let's do it."
That's good. Yes.
Yeah, this is true. Have you met Pete before?
I met Pete at our reunion on Sunday, and then of course through Radio Friends Again.
2 years ago, I met you in person too.
Yeah. Oh, that's right too. Yes.
So Pete, why don't you give the folks out there a little bit of a background on you? Because talk about an amazing career, and now I like how you explained how you were doing what you're doing now, but used to do it for the masses. And now you do it for one-on-one. So maybe just give us a little brief overview of your whole life in the biz.
Well, sure. Well, I was introduced to radio by my dad when I was maybe, 5 or 6 years old. He had a stereo set, and he let me play with it. Eventually, I took it apart and fortunately put it back together again. Discovered radio, discovered that there were some stations that had the same thing on AM and FM dials. Like in New York, WOR was AM and FM. WNBC was AM and FM. And so I got really, really hooked on that. And my dad was, he was kind of running this group for kids in my high school, but kids who were older than me. And they were invited to appear on a local radio station. Well, the closest thing we had to a local radio station was a New York station. I grew up in New Jersey. So it was WJRZ in Hackensack, New Jersey, which also served New York City, eventually became 97 DJ. Our friend Bill Rock worked there, but way before I did. And I got hooked just by standing in the control room watching the show. The PD, the program director, was hosting it. My dad was in with the kids in the studio. And afterwards, I cornered the program director. I said, "Got any jobs for somebody who's 16? And he said, "I don't know, Mike, what can you do?" I said, "I can write commercials." This was a union shop, so that was the best they could do. It was AFTRA and IBEW for the engineers. So anyway, the general manager ended up hiring me for the summer. That's how I ended up starting in radio. I was and am also a semi-pro musician. I have my piano is right over here, and there probably isn't an instrument I don't play. But so I decided I wasn't going to become a concert pianist. I was going to become a DJ, a smoking hot DJ. Went through the New England radio farm team. Many of our friends who are on your Friday show went through the the same farm team, Terry Woods, Jack Casey, all worked at the same station in New Hampshire, in fact. And I worked my way up until I found an opening in New Haven at WAVZ, which WAVZ was a legend in its own size compared to DRC, but it was 1,000 watts and covered the market. I worked there for about 4 years as a jock and then was promoted to program director. Talked the owners into changing the FM station, which was easy listening elevator music, into changing it into what the AM was, top 40. We just moved the AM lock, stock, and barrel over to the FM. And that was KC 101, still on the air after 47 years in the same format. And that was so much fun. That was in August of 1979. And in January of 1980, I got a call from the brass at NBC, at the NBC radio network. And they said, we've got this dog of an FM station. It's been on the air for 50 some odd years, 97.1 WNBC FM. And, they said, would you like to come and talk to us about programming it? I said, sure. They said, how about tomorrow, 9 a.m.? So, of course, I was there. It was a little early. I could have been there right away, I guess. And I was hired. Probably the next day, I think I was hired. And I stayed there for 3 years. It took maybe 6 months for us to become number one, from number 22 to number one.
So, excuse me, Pete. So, what year was that? Because it's like you were right in the middle of it, like when AVZ went to KC 101.
AVZ, yes, that was 1979 then.
Okay,
and then 1980 was when I went to WYNY in New York.
Okay, and that was the NBC FM.
That's the NBC FM. Yep.
I thought it was. No, I thought it was. Excuse me. I only because I remember we had this discussion recently, and I thought it was interesting how the brass, and that's always been something about Connecticut. The brass were able to listen. The New York brass were able to listen to what a great job you were doing in New Haven, because they'd be out in the Hamptons or wherever they would be enjoying their time off, and they'd be listening to the radio, and they picked up what you were doing. And that's kind of, that was what I thought was kind of neat. They thought what you were doing with this little radio station, in New Haven, and how you turned it into what you did with their FM. Wow, that would really be something to do there. So that's kind of neat how they just picked you up without a lot of experience. They caught up on you and thought you had a lot of talent to bring to the market.
Apparently, I was 26, which was a little young to be working as a program director in New York. But yes, these guys all had summer homes in the Hamptons, as I was telling you this past weekend. And word got around, and they said, boy, this station really sounds good. Can't turn it off. They're talking about KC 101. Because it did have a special sound, a special sparkle to it in all respects. Just the right music, the mixture of 60s oldies with current music and 70s songs. And we also had a really spectacular technical sound that kept people listening almost. It made them not be able to turn the dial to another station.
Yeah, Pete, what about talent, on-air talent? Did you hire a whole new on-air talent?
I brought the whole staff, Dave, lock, stock, and barrel, from the AM to the FM. Jerry Christopher had been doing mornings. He's now at WJMJ in Hartford. And he worked at WDRC after he worked for us, but he had been working at Waves for 3 years. And Danny Lyons, who's now at Weeby in Bridgeport. Peter Bush, who had been working for Waves. Basically, everybody who was on waves just assumed their new shift on the FM, and I
Now,
put
what did you do
myself
with
on
the-
the air.
Yeah. What was the FM? What did you do with the AM station, WAVZ?
We music of your life.
Oh, God.
Yeah, well,
Music for your wife.
It was easy, cheap, and automatable. The guy who invented the format "Music of Your Life," Al Ham, who was also a musician, a bass player back in the big band days. I showed him how we could automate it. I took the owner of our station, Dick Monahan, to a station in Pennsylvania they were playing something else, but they were automated. He wanted to see an automation system. So we went to Pennsylvania, saw it, and he said, I'll just buy whatever they've got. And he did. And we set it up, and that's what happened to the AM. It was Music of Your Life for, as I understand it, another 4 or 5 years, even though I was no longer there. It was very successful, but what we were really looking to do was to make the FM successful. And indeed we did. We debuted with an 11 share in New Haven
Nice.
in the first book. And guess who our primary competitor station was?
WDRC.
Yep.
You got it.
FM. Yep.
FM,
I know. Yeah.
Yep. And so anyway, I got hired in New York, stayed there for 3 years. There was no top 40 station in New York at the time, so we occupied that niche. There was no adult contemporary soft rock station, so we occupied that niche. There was an oldies station, CBS FM, but they were playing really old oldies, like oldies for people who were much older than me, oldies from the 50s and so forth. So I said, well, let's play 60s and 70s instead. We ended up playing 4 of those an hour, 4 60s and 70s oldies an hour, in addition to a very short playlist of current music, lots of jingles, of course. We had pretty much unlimited budget for jingles, for oh my goodness, for the air talent. We had the best air talent money can buy, including Bill St. James, who had worked years before as Bill Hart at DRC, and Bill Rock, who had worked at Waves and at DRC. I hired the people I knew, basically, and paid them. They all made more money than me too, and that's just the way it was, because they were in AFTRA, so they were making scale or way higher than scale. I can't tell you how much Bill St. James was making, but it was more than I've ever made in a lifetime. And stayed there through 3 general managers. I got a raise every time a new GM came in too, for them to show that they wanted me to stay. And after a while, after 3 years, I started consulting other stations around the country, started getting calls from owners and managers of other radio stations saying, we were in New York last week. This is before the internet, before streaming. They had to come to New York to hear the station. We really like what you're doing. Can you do something like that for us in Oklahoma City or Salt Lake City or LA or Philadelphia, which was my first client? And I started doing that. Unfortunately, I didn't realize I had signed a non-compete contract. And I got called up into the VP, executive VP's office. And he said, you got to make a choice, Pete. It's Y&Y or consulting. I stopped him cold. I said, I'm already making twice what with just 2 clients, I'm making twice what I'm making here. I can't answer that question. It's too easy. Plus, the secret was that Scott Shannon was coming to New York to put Z100 on the air. the worst to first station that they talk
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
about.
yeah.
Yep.
And I was getting kind of nervous. I knew that was going to be happening in a few months, so I beat him to it and left. And WYNY, the station I was programming, went down like that, like a rock.
Oh, yeah, you
After I
jumped. You
left.
jumped at the right time. You saw the writing on the wall.
Sure did. Yep, I sure did. And I consulted for 20 years with a little time off. 2.5 years. I bought a radio station in Hamden, Connecticut, which served New Haven. It was the station was off the air at the time. It was silent. It had gone bust. And I bought it with a couple of partners for $90,000 with much less down. I mean, almost no money down. I knew a secret nobody else knew. It was a daytimer, but it was going to be getting full-time authority. It was on a Mexican clear channel. And we had the U.S. had just signed an agreement with Mexico, allowing these former daytimers, the sunrise to sunset only stations, to be full time. And so we just the day we signed on, we stayed on the air all night at 1,000 watts, which was our full power. Station made it more than half the way to Hartford up that way, and east to Groton and west to Bridgeport, covered quite an area. And it wasn't long before we started making a whole lot of money, until some smart program director at WDRC FM, who was obviously not your dad, Steve. Your dad was no longer working there. This person said, "Hey, let's go oldies." Maybe it might have even been the boss, the big guy, who shall go nameless. But
Yeah, it was interesting, Pete, that you say that, because my dad in 1983, April of 83, that was when he was last, at the station. And from his hospital bed, he said, without a program director, tell them to go oldies, and because we're known for that music. And he goes, they won't bite the bullet and go all the way with the FM yet. So tell them to start it on the AM. He says, because he felt pretty confident that that's where the station would also go on the FM. But he knew it was such a drastic change that they would kind of put their toes in the water. And so it was kind of neat that it was the book. I mean, it was like everybody, he wrote the book. And it was that kind of thing.
He knew.
Yeah, it was really.
He knew.
So what year was it about? Excuse me, Pete. So what year was it about when all this change happened?
Summer of 1986.
Yep.
This was July of 1986. We hit the air, and everything was great for about a year. I think it must have been about 9 months before DRC FM went all oldies, and I was terrified, because, of course, DRC FM has a full market signal in New Haven, just as KC 101 had nearly a full market signal in Hartford. But this was, I had renamed this station Winner Radio 1220 AM Stereo. I rebuilt it with the help of Frank Clifford, engineer Frank Clifford.
Frank well.
Yeah.
Frank could build any radio station.
you probably know his person who was his wife for a while. She worked
Andrea
for me as
Pasquale.
a jock, right? Yep. And in fact, Andrea worked there the first night we went all night. I got the license in the mail, and I said, "Can you work till 6 a.m.?" She was on from 6 p.m. Sure, no problem. Anyway. We rebuilt the station. It already had a newer transmitter, and I was Mr. Gear. So, Mr. Electronic Gear, I set up all of the audio processing from used equipment, and we rebuilt cart machines and Automaxes and all kinds of stuff. Made it sound like gangbusters. I mean, this station really got out, and it sounded terrific. In AM stereo, you couldn't tell the difference between AM and FM stereo.
Until you went under a bridge.
I'm sorry?
I said until you went under a bridge, and then you get static in both channels.
Well, of course. Unless you were within a few miles of the towers, sure. But we started selling time on the station, and I had the jocks selling. Anyone who I hired, and they were mostly my friends, my old friends, hired them, and they sold, and we started making more money than grossing more money than the station had in its history since 1962 when it went on the air, until oldies DRC FM. And apparently the salespeople at DRC FM decided they'd come down to New Haven and start selling. Not a bad idea since they got in like a local. And that was kind of the end of that. I continued programming the station and running the station for another year or so. And I found a buyer, and he bought it, made it Spanish language. Didn't have any more success than I had, really, but the station continued on the air. Quinnipiac University bought it. And by, I don't know, was it like 2015 or something like that? They decided they wanted to get rid of it. And our friend Clark Smith took it off their hands, but it's kind of a weasel deal, not on his end, but on Quinnipiac's end. And he has the station on, but he can only have a few hundred watts. It's more like a fancy streaming station that happens to have an over-the-air signal as opposed to a regular radio station that might also have streaming. So he found space at a goat farm on the Madmere Mountain in Hampton, and they let him have their little shelter building and put the old transmitter from WQUN 1220 up there, and Clark is on the air with it now. He's not making money, but he's having fun.
Oh yeah, no, he's having a blast. Now, Pete, excuse me. Then when you had that going, did you still keep the consulting going on the side, so you were able to balance all that and bring a nice income in?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Okay.
I had to have a source of income of some sort. So yeah, I would go to Philadelphia for the day and work on their station. My job as a consultant was to create programming that would enable them to sell better, to make more money. That's the name of the game is. But Pete, excuse me. Yeah. So how did you go from being there in Hamden to your history and what you did with 92.5 with YZ? I mean, talk about bringing something to the market. That was amazing. Well, that's an excellent question, and it spans about a 10-year.
Oh, okay.
10-year span. Once I got rid of this AM station, I went back to consulting, and did that for about 10 years. And consulting started to dry up with the new laws. The 1996. What was it? The law that allowed companies to own.
Oh yeah, the deregulation scene.
Market,
yeah,
all the deregulation stuff. So I started working part-time at Weeby as a DJ for $10 an hour, which was the going rate at the time. And while I was still looking for a job, and in 2005, I went to work for Manuel Rodriguez at Country 92.5 WWYZ in Hartford, where I stayed for 4.5 years. Got the best ratings the station ever got, and man, do I hate country music. But it doesn't matter.
No, but you kind of designed that.
Matter.
You designed it to be like Connecticut type of country. I mean, it wasn't like boot kicking type of country.
My dog died and got sick the other day.
Yeah, I mean Marshall Tucker coming in, and a lot of the bands that started on country ended up going to cross over into adult contemporary.
Around Christmas time, we even played the Beach Boys Christmas album. All that stuff. It was still Connecticut country 92.5. Actually, it was Connecticut country 92, because anything above 92, there wasn't anything at the time. So it didn't matter with the point crap that everybody's got, 0.7 or 0.5. There weren't as many stations on the air, so it didn't matter.
But you know how to hire personality, Pete. I mean, all these other, and I think that helped a lot with YZ in the beginning with 92.5.
Hired my friends again, Steve. The late Floyd Wright. I also left some people in place. If they were great, then they were great, and they could stay. But I also had applied my magic to it. The golden ear stuff. The engineering guys stepped back and said, "Pete, you can go ahead and tool all you want with the Optimods and all those things." In fact, after about a year or so, they had me adjusting all the microphone processing, the live remote broadcast processing. I was doing all the processing sounds. Ran out of gas one day on the way up to Meriden, which was their transmitter was right next door to DRC FMs, which was fun because I had to. Yeah, I had to call the engineer to come pick me up. I was so excited about going up there, but I had to go up there because I couldn't reboot the processor. It's a long story. Anyway, everything was digital by that time, but it was a kind of a magical atmosphere. I created a station that you couldn't turn off. Mm-hmm. And I realized I was beginning to use some ideas that are related to mental health. Mm-hmm. Getting people to feel positively about themselves, getting people to feel positively about what they're listening to so they don't turn it to another station. One day in 2009, we had been number one in the market. And by the market, I mean the Hartford, New Haven market. When we designed my financial deal, it was I would get bonuses for the ratings in Hartford plus New Haven. It's called the DMA now, but I think it was called something else before then. And they would add the numbers together, add the ratings together, and I would get a rather significant bonus when we were number one in adults 25 to 54. And that happened to happen every quarter, every 3 months for the entire 4 years I was there. After a while, Manuel was asked to leave. They brought in some other guy to be, not the guy who's there now, but a guy to be general manager, because the money that was going to me was coming out of his pocket, and that was no fun. And I even knew that. I offered to take a significant pay cut just to stick around because I saw that Clear Channel was purging people left and right. Yeah. One day in May of 2009, they fired 30% of their program directors, 30% of their disc jockeys, and they had already fired so many DJs. It wasn't even funny. When I needed to do a contest, for example, on the air, and my midday DJ was voice tracked from Washington, D.C., from the Clear Channel station in D.C. I came up with the idea of recording every possible thing she could ever say in the middle of this contest. It was about groceries for a year, or whatever it is you want. We'll buy it for a whole year. We'll pay for it. Every possible line went into our automation system, our touch screens. So when we had the contestant on the air, I'd be in the studio, but she would be answering the calls. And that got not stolen, but shared by all of the other Clear Channel stations. Because
automation. Yeah.
It was a great idea. Earlier on, I had consulted for a bunch of the automation companies, the automation manufacturers. I came up with, some of the concepts for voice tracking to make it easy for DJs to do that. That was back when I was doing consulting. I also came up with a way to run ball games, whatever it was, whether it was the Yankees or the Red Sox or just about anything really, running it from the ballpark, sending a signal down to the radio station so that it would fire off the local commercial like that when it was time to play for a spot break. 1,200 Clear Channel AM stations picked up the idea with my blessing. Of course, it was one way of me sort of giving back to my employer. And that too was, I guess, a great idea, because we'd have to have board ops, people running the board or producing the games. I came up with a way to handle rainouts, rain delays, cancellations. We were getting the Yankees on WPOP, which also was my responsibility, from WCBS, News Radio 880. And they would play the signal for us to break away. There were also another 20 or 30 stations on the Yankees network. But the local stations would break away when the engineer or producer at WCBS would push the button. It would send a silent tone through the satellite. And I came up with a way to make it so that they didn't need a board operator to break away or even to worry about rain delays or rainouts, except one day where I got a call from Steve Honeycomb, who at the time was the general sales manager of our cluster. He said, it was 6:15 in the morning. Steve, did you know that News Radio 88 is on 1410? By the time the conversation was over, I had it fixed because I could operate it from my iPhone, and I just broke away and put POP back on to whatever ESPN show was supposed to be on at that time, because WPOP was an ESPN radio affiliate.
So at what point, Pete, only because I know we're going to have to jump in a bit.
Yeah.
At what point, Pete, did you kind of, decide, okay, I've had enough of radio, and you went off into what you're doing now?
Well, I wish it were that simple, but it wasn't that simple. I got purged along with those, with 30 other PDs in the spring of 2009. They gave me a very generous amount of money to go, to leave. It was basically about a year's worth of pay, and gave me a little time to figure out what to do. And for all of this time, I had been practicing behavior modification as a program director, helping people understand that they would always get positive gratification whenever they tuned to this radio station I was programming, because it sounded great. It played their music. It almost, it almost made them with the classic image of the the watch going in front, tick tock, tick tock. You will listen to me all the time, and that's how I decided that I was already in the mental health business. I was already making people feel right. The DJs had come to me, my door was always open. The DJs had come to me over the years saying, hey, I had a terrible vacation last week. It rained and my girlfriend didn't want to do anything with me. You know what I mean? And, so I would say something like, well, go ahead, take another week. What? Yeah, go ahead, take another week. Don't you have to ask your boss? Nah, I just take it. Things like that. And
that's really what was with my dad,
I was just saying thinking that,
well,
yes.
I don't know. I didn't know your dad personally.
Oh, but they'd come in and they'd sit down and they'd cry in their beer or whatever, and he'd give them a way to get through it,
Right. I was a counselor like Charlie was, sure. Now my wife, who had also been in radio before we met, when we were both each in our first marriages, had already gone back to school and earned her PhD degree in clinical psychology. She's a doctor. She's Dr. Salant. She said, well, why don't you try it without the doctorate? Because you don't have the time really to do it because you're older. I was 5 years older than her and I had to be making money. So I went back to school at Southern Connecticut State University, finished my undergrad. I went to Fordham University in New York City to get my master's degree in clinical social work. And it was about at that time we moved from Connecticut to Virginia Beach, Virginia, which is the town next to where we're living now. This is 2016. And I worked for a couple of years under supervision to get my license, got my state license, and all of a sudden, here I am allowed to help people feel better about themselves or whatever their problem is. And I have been doing that now for 9 years, I guess.
Pete, do you miss being in the broadcast industry?
Oh my God, I miss Dave, I miss what radio was. I don't miss what radio is. But yes, every day I do. That's why one of the reasons why I was interested in participating in the Friday Zoom meetups that you guys have put together. And it's one of the many reasons why I keep a computer in my little office in our house and do production all the time. I just can't get it out of my blood.
Yeah, once it gets in your blood, it's hard to get rid of it. When I left WDRC back in in 1980, I went over to ESPN, where I spent the next 30 years there.
Which was pretty new at that time.
Oh yeah, I mean, and the things we got away with back then, couldn't do it today. And
Sure.
Not that we did anything wrong.
I understand.
But and I missed radio. I went into television, and television was a new concept for me at that time. But I missed the excitement of radio, all the promotions we did, and getting involved in the promotions. And then this guy next to me said, "Hey, I'm doing a radio show at WPOP." And he says, "Can you help me?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, I'll do something." I had my son with me, and he says, "So you're going to be with Steve Parker on the radio?" He says, "No, Steve Parker will never get on the air. He'll forget about it. He'll be off to doing something else." And a week later, I get a call from Steve.
Steve has a little bit of ADD, doesn't he? Okay.
Yes.
Oh no, that's mandatory in what I do.
So I get a call from.
He let you on the air, right?
Yes,
I mean, you were his partner.
Yeah, but it is the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, learn by doing. I didn't have a frickin' clue, because the last time I had been on the air, I was at Kiss FM in the late 80s, and doing late nights, overnight stuff. So I knew that if I had Dave And so what we did was we put Dave at the controls, put Dave at the host seat, and I went into the guest seat. And for about a week or two, he was like training me until gradually we could make that change. But I wouldn't let him leave the studio. And I said, okay, now you'll be a co-host. Move over there. So it worked out great.
Yeah, then he would.
of course,
Then he'd be talking with somebody, and then I get in on the conversation. He'd get up and leave, and I'm like,
Mr. Hotshot, you take it.
Yeah, but I'm not anywhere near the controls.
What Steve doesn't realize is that had you gotten up and left, and had he moved over to the hosting position, he would have been able to pull it off fine. He'd seen it enough, and he worked enough, just enough at KISS FM. Yeah. It's just a couple of buttons and a couple of sliders, and
it's kind of like flying a 747. You look at all those controls. You only need a couple of buttons to get the thing up and landing.
But anyway, you got I never heard you, but you both were legends when I took over as program coordinator of POP in 2005. Your names were flying all over the walls because you were the only thing
Parker didn't know it was
local. You were the only thing that was local and any good at the station, with a couple of exceptions. There was a woman, I think, on the air at the time, but in any event.
Judy Jarvis. Yeah,
Jarvis.
Yes. Right, Judy Jarvis. Right. You both were legendary, and that gave us something to build on. We ended up having Jason Page doing a simulcast from POP, simulcast on waves in New Haven on 1300 and 1410. And I think he mentioned you guys several times. Anyway,
things that were broken in the studio. That's when he mentioned us.
Yes.
If you don't believe in yourself, you won't be able to pull it off. If you believe in yourself, especially something like running a console or being on the radio, it doesn't take long to learn how to do it. It's just a bunch of volume controls, really, is all it is. But if you don't believe in yourself, you're going to screw it up. So you have to stop thinking. You have to stop thinking so much about it and just do it.
Well, Steve always used to get on my case. He'd say, "Talk. You got to talk." And I'm not used to being on that end of the spectrum. And he would, talk. And then I got loosened up, and then it was crazy. And just when we were really getting good at it, and then things changed.
That's it.
That's it.
Well, sure, but Dave, you had been teaching guys how to do it since 1960 something, when
72
or 1972, when you were a technician and engineer at DRC. You would be helping the jocks, and no, come on, you can make it more upbeat. Talk to me, not to everybody, or whatever. You would give them helpful hints.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I worked with I used to teach at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting too, and I remember doing a class, and I was filling in for somebody, and it was a performance class, and the student got a real smart ass kid. Hey, he says, "Aren't we supposed to be taught by Dick McDonough and that?" I go, "Yeah, well, Dick's not here." "Well, are you qualified?" I said, "Well, let me ask you something. Who critiques Dick McDonough?" He says, "Charlie Parker." I says, "Yes." "And who do you think critiques Charlie Parker?" And he goes, "I don't know." I says, "You're talking to him." And he goes, "Oh," and then he sat right down. I had no problem with him after that. So,
well, true. That's all true.
Yeah. It was great.
Well, that's the thing, it really comes down to, and like my dad, he loved to direct guys and women because he knew what they were capable of. And also, if you are a decent talent, you're going to take direction. And if you want to become a much better talent, even though it's a whole different world, I've often said a good actor could be great. Just put Spielberg in there for a little bit, and that's the thing.
That's all. Yeah.
A lot of the key to the business is taking direction. What do you want? That's really it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I learned
really
from
true.
Charlie how to deal with people. That's what I got out of Charlie.
And
even though I was in production, just how to deal with people. Because you're dealing with all these different personalities coming in and egos and that.
I have a feeling you caught them doing something spectacular. You caught them doing something really neat. Hey, man, that was a great edit or a great segue or whatever, and that would boost them up. And somehow I must have learned all that by osmosis or something, because that was the way I worked as a program director and as a coach, was simply by catching them doing something outrageously good.
Yep, and giving them credit for it too.
And again, even now when we do the radio program, Pete's always up there sending me little one-on-one hints while we're going along, and like, move on.
Well, he's always Peter. Pete, excuse me, Pete. You were always giving compliments, and you gave me 2 good compliments one time. We were doing the Radio Friends again, and I came up with, I said something, and you said, Dave, you're on the wrong end of the microphone. And I said, yeah. I said, I always wanted to be on the other end of the microphone. By the way, where were you when I wanted to go to Waves? And because I grew up in the New Haven area. And then the one other recently I said, WDRC. And you said, Dave, you know how to pronounce W. And not many guys know how to. I mean, that takes a program director just to pick up those little things.
That's what they used to do at CBS. I mean, at CSB.
Yeah.
They would go around the room and they'd say, okay, say W, see how many people got that right, you know?
You know, it's like news. My wife said, news, it's news. I said, news. And he says, well, who taught you that? I says, broadcasting. And I taught that.
See all of what you picked up. You picked it up and you ran with it, and that made you qualified to be a teacher.
Yeah, and
there's so many things you could do if you wanted to. If you decided you wanted to teach something part-time, even if it has nothing to do with radio, you already have the skills.
Yeah, and it's I taught at CSB for 49 years, and
I know.
Finally hung up the razor blades, as they say, and ran into a lot of good students, and it was. I even had this guy as a student of mine. You were a student of mine on the Saturday class.
Hung up the razor blades. Is that for cutting your wrists when you're? Okay.
Thank God for digital radio.
Yeah, that's the one thing that Dave would show me all this other stuff, and I'd be like, yeah, okay. And I used to always say, I'll do anything here, but if it's back there, we're screwed. That's it.
And you were just and Steve, you were just chicken. But with that, but long story short. That this is how I learned how to be a pretty good, maybe better than pretty good mental health professional.
Talk about a long road.
It took me, I guess, 40 years to do it, but I did it. It was a natural segue. Ooh, segue. And it's something I can do until I can no longer sit up straight. So
yeah, well, when I went to POP with Steve, I got back into that world of radio, and it felt so good. I even got to see people I hadn't seen in years that were in radio, and they were happy to see me.
Yes, the socialization feels so good.
Yeah.
That's why I came up from Norfolk, Virginia, to the Hartford area this past weekend to be with people I either know or know of, but I knew I would have a great time. So the socialization is absolutely essential to a long life.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, you said that you and your wife had that conversation when we first started doing the weekly, Radio Friends again, the Zoomcast. She was the one that really told you to stay on with that, right?
Yeah. She said Friday morning, just as long as it takes every week or whenever, just do it. Stay involved with your friends. And a few weeks later, I said, guess what? I've got a couple of dozen new friends, and they're really neat.
Yeah. Well,
it's very therapeutic. Doing the Radio Friends again, this is.
Yeah. That's why we did this. It's never, whenever they try to throw a paycheck at you, that ruins a wonderful relationship. That's the way I look at it. Why ruin it?
I don't know.
The money Steve and I made at POP was unbelievable. I'm still waiting for the check to come in.
Yeah. Okay.
I said, Dave, we're not going to make any money. He goes, no, radio really doesn't pay any money. I said, no, you understand? We're not making any money. There's nothing. It's volunteer work. And
anyways, Steve, Dave, I've got to thank you for asking me to come on the show today.
Thank you,
because I will always jump at the prospect of talking about radio.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to get out of here. Just because we talk about radio. That's what we try to do. We'll talk about radio again and again and again until they catch up with us. But no, Pete, I mean, just absolutely incredible. And I'm so grateful that you and I got to connect, because I'm not kidding you. Through the years, your name was always coming up. Pete Salant did this, and Pete Salant did that. I'm like, geez, So when I remember at the reunion a couple of years ago, and I said, Pete Salant was here? Oh, yeah, he was sitting over there. Oh, okay. So I'm glad we did finally connect. That's really, really good. And we thank you for taking more than a few minutes, being very generous with your time, because you have had a heck of a career. And I dare to say that's still probably the Cliff Notes version of all the different things involved. So we thank you for taking you through all that. And that's why hopefully people will continue to come to the podcast, because we'll continue to talk about radio.
Yeah, and this will be on YouTube as well. And
looking forward to being embarrassed by seeing myself.
See, I thought I had a great out cue then to continue to talk about radio. And then you go, we're working on it.
Got to get you a jingle for this, too.
Oh, yeah, we know somebody.
Yeah.
All right, man, thanks a lot. Well, we will catch you next time, and we'll see you on Radio Friends again on our other program next Friday. And everybody else tuning into the podcast, thanks for hanging out while we, Dave Overson, and I'm Steve Parker, as we talk
about
radio.